Yeah, all right. Welcome everyone to the first workshop, which is the output of a larger project that I'll discuss in a bit more detail in a minute on Brussels in the European Research Area. I have the pleasure to welcome you and to introduce you to the workshop. My name is Bas van Heur. At the bottom of the slide, I'm the director of the Cosmopolis Center for Urban Research, which is situated within the Department of Geography here at the VUB. And I'm also a professor of human geography at this university as well. So the actual sort of body of the work of the project is mostly related to Nicola Dotti, who you all know, a postdoctoral research at our research group, and who has a PhD in economic geography and territorial economics. And I mentioned this because it sketches, I think, sets out a bit the analytical coordinates of what this workshop is about. And at the same time, with one foot in DG Research and Innovation, so the policy, analytical, economic geography take of this. I'm just going to go through a number of sort of basic coordinates of what the project is about, and then Nicola can do the sort of difficult stuff. So he will sort of dive into sort of depth and discuss the project outcomes in some detail. The project, so this workshop itself, is part of a wider project on the Europeanization of research and policy innovations in Brussels. So largely a project about sort of, okay, what is the geography of research about? How is the geography of research structured on the European level? Where can we see sort of regional agglomerations, regional concentrations of research? What does it mean for regional policies? And what does it mean for the actual relation between research knowledge and policy knowledge? So in the relation between research knowledge and policy innovation. So if we would have to summarize in a nutshell what the project is about, then that is roughly it. The project is funded by Innovirus, which is the main Brussels-based funding agency within sort of one of the domains called evaluation and optimization of the research and innovation policies of Brussels. Fortunately, Innovirus takes its role of being a funder for technical innovation quite creatively and openly. So it also funds, you could say, more widely social innovation, policy innovation research, as long as it has a kind of policy relevance to Brussels. The project, I think, is also part of a wider interest in the relation between research knowledge, between universities and regional development, urban development. And in that sense, of course, it relates to a wider body of work in this field, largely coming from economic geography, research policy, urban studies. Most practically speaking, it also relates to an ongoing Brussels Studies Institute project where we try to investigate the relation or the impact of the universities on Brussels, so the role of the universities in Brussels regional development. That's a project that is funded and organized by both the VUB, the ULB, as well as the Faculté Université Saint-Louis. So the Nicola's project, in a way, can be sort of divided into three project phases. First project phase being, and that is what this workshop is largely situated within, Brussels in the European Research Area, which is mainly an analysis of the position of the Brussels capital region within the wider European Research Area, largely involving quantitative research. So most of what we'll be discussing today, in any case the data that will be presented, refers to this first project phase. And in a way, this workshop is, you can see, the closure perhaps of this first project phase. Following this first project phase will be a second one on research and policy innovation for regional development, in which we try to focus on the different regional strategies in place to support sort of the regional research system. That will most likely involve sort of a comparative study of a number of different city regions within Europe, of which Brussels, of course, is one, in order to get a sense of the wider landscape of regional innovation systems in Europe. And then the third part of the research project will be on research and policy innovations in Brussels, where we, in a sense, return back to Brussels, but will engage in more qualitative, in-depth studies of particular research policy domains, focusing on the relation between research knowledge and policy knowledge. So think of domains such as environment and energy, development, economic development, or transport. That's roughly what we'll be discussing in the third phase of the project. So the basic rationale of this workshop is actually to present some of the intermediate project output to key stakeholders, so to you. And of course, on that basis, to actually discuss, well, some of the analytical assumptions underlying this project, One being, that's of course sort of the background in economic geography, that there is some kind of link, and I formulated consciously vague because there's a quite complex discussion as to what that link then actually is. But there's some kind of link between the regional context, social, economic, political, cultural, and research performance. So the idea that research performance is not solely dependent on sort of internal dynamics within the university system, or within the research system, but that there's some kind of external link, you could say, with the regional context in which universities operate. That often is discussed under the heading of regional innovation systems or related debates on triple helix, etc., etc. So that's what we would like to discuss with you. Okay, do the data that we present actually sort of support the kind of analytical assumptions that we have? And on a more sort of data, sort of more empirical level, we want to discuss with you some of the data that are now sort of, that have come out of the project so far, which shows that Brussels indeed is a relatively competitive research region within Europe, but it is in its own rather atypical way because of the high concentration of European associations and, you could say, sort of governmental actors. So it creates a particular dynamic to Brussels, which is perhaps different than what we see happening in other cities and other city regions. Quantitatively, sort of practically speaking, we operationalize the notion of research performance, of sort of excellence, whatever term you want to use, by focusing on the participation of Brussels-based actors in EU framework programs. So that's, I mean, of course we do much more, but for this part of the research, that is sort of our main entrance into the debate. So when we see FP participation as an indicator, of course, of Europeanization, most obviously, because by participating you sort of connect with other European actors, but also, and that's perhaps less obviously, as an indicator of regional capacity, of regional research performance. Because on the one hand, we argue that sort of FP participation, the ability to participate in FP projects, reflects, you could say, a relatively competitive, innovative regional system of research. So you have a certain critical mass locally in place that allows you, that enables you, that supports your participation in FP networks. But on the other hand, of course, it's also through the very act of FP participation, through participating in these networks, that innovative knowledge from elsewhere is introduced into local regions. So we have sort of, you could say, a tension or sort of a complementarity between critical mass locally and critical networks translocally. That is sort of some of the analytical underlying questions. So that just as a preliminary introduction, I mean, there are many questions that we can discuss. I mean, some few open questions here. I mean, so can we actually see that more FP participation or particular types of FP participation actually lead to regional policy innovation? I'm not saying that the data that we have will say us anything about it, but I think it's definitely an interesting sort of follow-up question that we should discuss. A rather complex question, I think, is what then is the right skill for research governance? Because when I talk about regional innovation systems, regional research systems, I leave it quite open as to what then the region is. In Brussels, is the Brussels capital region, or should we also include the UCL and the KU Leuven? Is that also part of the region, the wider region of Brussels, or should we perhaps simply see Belgium as a region? I mean, there's quite a, ambiguous debate there. And then following on some of the, you could say, niche domains in which Brussels is relatively strong, what kind of governance or research focus should we develop for Brussels? Can we say anything on that on the basis of the data that we have? So I want to leave it there and then give the word to Nicola.